My name is Linda Ikechukwu. It's a native Nigerian name, and so I'm sure she had a difficult time pronouncing it. I'm a software developer here in Lagos, Nigeria. Currently, I work at Huawei as a cloud solutions intern. So today I'll be talking on architecting scalable and maintainable Sass, and that is how to write CSS styles in styles so that they are scalable and maintainable when the code base starts to get larger and you need to add more features to it. So this could be you or someone else if you end up writing styles that are not structured to be scalable and maintainable from day one. So if you know that this project you're working on is going to get larger someday, is going to require more features added to it or more components added to it, then from the very beginning, you should be thinking of scalability and maintainability and how to incorporate that into your style sheets. Okay, I think I did some introduction. So this is me. Yes, I'm a front-end web developer, and that's my Twitter handle, and that's my website. So first, some background check, and let's talk about what Sass is for those of us who may not have used Sass before. Yeah, I like to say that CSS is like Clark Kent and Sass is like Superman. So basically, Sass is CSS with superpowers. It has this, it has additional features that are not native to CSS yet, and those are its superpowers that like gives you the ability to write much more scalable and maintainable code. And so some people might ask if Sass is still relevant right now, seeing as it's been in existence for over 10 years, and my answer would be yes. So this chart is from it's from a survey, State of CSS, from 2019. And from here, you can see that Sass is still as relevant as ever. So my answer to the question if Sass is still relevant right now is yes, because a lot of companies still use it and a lot of developers still use it. So let's look at the superpowers of Sass that I earlier on mentioned and what makes Sass so awesome for those who haven't used it before. The first are variables, and use the variables to store singular values, just like the new CSS variable. So you store singular values that will be reused in your project, just like the way the new CSS variables are used. The second superpower are placeholders. So with placeholders, you can store grouped CSS declarations that will be reused across your code base. Like for the example here, we have this common flex declaration to get an element to style an element with the flex box. So this is quite common, and you can just put all these styles in a placeholder and then reuse it extensively throughout your code base. Next are minzins. So minzins are very, very similar to placeholders, but the difference is that you can impute properties variables, more like arguments when you write like functions, arguments into it that will be passed as values to any properties they are attached to. So just like we have here, this is a common browser prefixes that we all have to do to make sure that our code comply with the different browsers out there. So this is a common use of mixing, can be put together and then reused across your code base. And when you impute an argument with, it's passed through and replaced wherever that argument is. And the next superpower is nesting. So in Sass, you get to be able to nest CSS selectors under their parent element. This way, the code is much more maintainable and readable. So if I look at this, I'll know that all the styles here are styles for my navigation. And so I don't have to go through the whole code base looking for where styles for the navigation is. And so much more. So Sass has a couple of awesome features that if you want to learn more about it, I have some resources included in the further reading at the end of this slide, and you can just take a look at it. Now, because this talk isn't actually about Sass, but about writing maintainable and scalable Sass, I won't spend so much time talking about Sass itself. So how do we write scalable and maintainable Sass? So the first step is to think modular, break things up, keep everything simple. Break things up into files, break everything into files. Everything should have its own file. And there's this quote, there's no such thing as too much files when using Sass, because everything will be compiled into one file, so you don't have to worry about performance or anything. There's no such thing as too much files. In order to that your CSS and style code base will be able to be scalable in the event of new features added, make sure that everything is broken down into files. So a file should have one. It's recommended that each file should have just one purpose and be properly named to reflect the purpose of that file. So let's say we want to style navigation. That navigation, every style concerning the navigation should be put into one file and named appropriately, like navigation.xcss. If you want to style a button, every styles regarding buttons should be put into one file and named according to what the file is for. So one file for one purpose. Now, in the Sass ecosystem, there's been a couple of debates as to what folder structure to follow when you have you're working on a large project, and the most popular one is this 7-in-1 folder pattern. Although you don't have to use everything, some of them are very optional. So the first one, the base should hold the style of should hold the styles that every page on your project will use. So these are basic styles like resets, typography, resets and typography, and styles that will be used throughout your code base. Then we have the components folder. This folder should contain all styles, all files that hold micro stylings for your project, for parts of your project. That is, it should contain files that hold styles for sections, for elements of elements of your project. So we have like styles for the button, style for the navigation, styles for the sidebar, the call to action cards, stuff like that. And then we have the layout folder, which is very, very optional. As a matter of fact, I have never used a layout folder in my projects. I'm of the opinion that anything that goes there can be moved into the component folder. So it contains a whole styles for major sections of the project and styles for grids. So it could hold styles for the header, the footer, the sidebar, and stuff like that. Then there's the pages folder, which should hold general style for each page. So for each page of your project, if you have specific styles that should be used on those pages, you can put them under the pages folder. And then there's the themes folder, which is another optional one that I really haven't used before. And it should hold styles for different themes of your project. Say you have themes for dark mode or light mode or admin section. It should hold files that contain styles to that. And then we have the helpers folder. This contains global variables, functions, and mixins, declarations. And then we have the vendors folder, which contains styles from third-party sources like Bootstrap, like Material CSS. Yeah. And the last one is the main.scss file, which is the file which all your files will be imported into, and then it will be compiled by the Sass compiler into just one file. So moving on, the next thing we can do to write more scalable code is to use a convention. And granted, there are several naming conventions out there, but I usually tell people to use BEM. Yes, it's very opinionated, but I feel that it's the most popular and it's very easy to understand and get started with. So talking a little about BEM, it stands for Block Element Modifier, naming classes, giving elements class names. So when we want to use that, a block is like the how do I put it, the top level component that contains other smaller elements. That's a block. So this is a navigation, and the navigation could be taken as the block, and the navigation links here are elements. So if I wanted to give this element a class name, I would then use this convention. So the block name, which is nav, and then 2 underscores, and then the element name. So that's a naming convention. It's advisable, it's recommended to use a naming convention because that way newer developers who join your team to work on your project are able to pick up fast and understand what a particular style rule does. Now, there's a downside to using BEM. Most times, people get to abuse the element nesting structure. So what we have here, the nav is so I mentioned that the block is the parent element of a component, and then the elements itself are the child elements of the block. So here you can see this naming nav and then the underscore menu. And since the li, which is a nav, the li is a child element of the UI class, this adheres to the BEM naming convention, but this is not ideal because it's a lot of nesting here. This is totally unreadable and too long, and it's not advisable. So instead of this, yeah, stay within 2-level element nesting. Don't drive yourself mad and others mad too when next you come back to your code base. So this is a much more better approach, and every child does not have to be named after its parent element. You can just use, every child does not have to be named after its parent element. You can just name all children elements according to after the block elements. That gives to much more better readability, and in your Sass code you don't have to go deep nesting so much. The next step, or the next tip, is to name things responsibly. So yes, it's agreed that naming things is one of the most difficult things to do. So, well, since it's that difficult, put some thoughts and effort into it, because it will go a long way to making sure that your code base is maintainable and very much scalable. So I have some tips here for naming things. The first one is to use fully descriptive words, but limit it to 2 words if possible. So yes, this is very, very descriptive, wavy drop-down button. Yes, but it's recommended that you keep your class names to a maximum of 2 words. So this would also pass your information across. Drop-down button. The second tip is to name things based on their function and not their appearance. So this variable is used to store the color red. Yes, we know, but what is its function in your project? Is it a button color? Is it your team's secondary color, or is it a link color? So the idea here is to name things based on what they stand for and not what they look like. The next tip, which we use extensively, is to go camel case for block level multi-word elements. This is because the BEM naming convention already uses dashes and underscores. So putting an extra dash in between the class name for the main block level elements could get confusing. So it's advisable that you use camel cased syntax for block level elements that exceed more than 1 word. Sorry. So the next tip is to avoid abbreviations. Yes, abbreviations are so nice and they save you a lot of time. You don't have to type out something in its full form. Yes, but as much as possible, avoid it. Recently, I had to make some changes to a code base, and I got to one style declaration, and the class name was HMU, and I was wondering, what exactly is HMU? What does it do? What's it doing here? So it's in naming things, avoid using abbreviations, please. Give it to us the way it is. Let the naming make sense. So there are exceptions to that. There are some widely used and accepted abbreviations that a higher percentage of developers are aware of. These are abbreviations that are like accepted in the developer ecosystem. So we have the nav in place of navigation, and the btn in place of buttons, cta in place of call to actions. So except for this, it's really nice if you avoid using abbreviations for naming classes. The next tip is to be lazy, really. Try as much as possible to not repeat yourself. So if you come across an opportunity to put things up together, keep things dry, do it, be lazy. And Sass gives you the ability to do that, so use it. So always look out for repeating patterns and use placeholders, mixins, and directives accordingly. So let's take a look at that. Here we have this that try to style something according to the flex bus. So we could refactor it to this using a placeholder. So we could all put this, and this ensures that we don't have to write out these sets of declaration over and over again wherever we need it. You can just do the extend the placeholder name and you're good to go. The styles from the placeholder are automatically applied to the box, and you can add extra styles to this. So this makes sure that our code base is really dry and really scalable. The next example here is mixins. So this was like the same example I used in the beginning of the talk. So for these browser prefixes, a couple of them, and writing them all over again, all over the place can get really stressful to the eye. So you can just group them together and use mixins instead. The next one is using directives. So Sass has a couple of directives. It has each, if, stuff like that. If you want to find out more, there are resources available to get more info on that. So this is really great, but we could break it down this here. So if we had more declarations for 14 pixels, hi guys, I'm really sorry. So yeah, my internet went off. This is like a common occurrence in Nigeria here. Stuff just happens. So the next step is to isolate components. So components should be, as much as possible, self-sufficient. So you can just reuse that file or pull it from that project and be able to reuse it in another project. So what do I mean by components being self-sufficient? So any variables or mixins or placeholders or functions that will only be used in a particular component should be locally scoped to it. So what this means is that if there are variables that you will only use in styling a particular component, like the example we have here, these colors will only be used for our buttons. So there is no need putting them in the global folder for variables. You can put them in the buttons file so that the variables are locally scoped. And if you ever want to reuse these styles, you can just pick up the file that way from one project to another, and it's totally reusable. And last but not the least is to use comments. So on Twitter, somebody there's this sort of argument that goes on sometimes if writing comments shows that you are still an upcoming developer, stuff like that. And I really don't get the concept behind it, because writing comments ensures that whenever you come back to your code, or if someone else takes over that code base, they are able to understand your train of thoughts and how you came to the conclusion of using a particular thing at a particular time. So please use comments on your code bases recklessly even. And you don't have to worry about anything, because when Sass is your production pipeline should be configured in a way that this style sheet will be minified. And so in minifications, comments are reduced. So there's no performance drawback to that. Yes, so for further reading, these are really awesome resources that you can take a look at to understand Sass at a deeper level and understand how to write more maintainable styles. And yeah, I think that's the end. So thank you very much for listening to me, and I'm so happy to be here. I mean, for this talk, I had just a day to prepare, because I was emailed just a day and asked, day before yesterday, and asked to speak. So really, thank all of you for listening to me. So if you want to look at the slides, you can use this link to look at the slides. Thank you so much.